As The Boys finale approaches, I don't want to only talk about the episodes that frustrated me, broke me, or almost made me quit the show. I want to talk about why I cared about this series in the first place. I've seen a lot of people saying, how do I talk about The Boys if I hate it so much? So I had the idea that I wanted to go back and take a look at the pilot. And little did I know that this would become my longest, most passionate script to this day. Passionate in a positive way. Spoilers. I mean, the title should tell you that it was perfect. I'm not someone who normally rewatches things, even when I love them. So this is actually my first time rewatching the pilot since it originally aired in 2019. And I'm curious, does it still hold up? Was season 1 really as good as I remember? And more importantly, what does the pilot reveal about the current state of The Boys by comparison? Because back in 2019, I called season 1 of The Boys the best season of television that year. Actually, I think I called it the best season of television since Breaking Bad ended. So after talking about one of the episodes that almost made me quit the series, it feels only right to go back to the episode that made me fall in love with the series. And honestly, I'm really excited. I hope it lives up to my memory. Here we go. And immediately, I love this opening. We begin from the perspective of kids talking about the latest Vought superhero movie like they're discussing the MCU. That is such a clean, efficient way to establish the world. Superheroes are real, but they are also entertainment products. Heroism exists, but it is packaged through trailers, franchises, celebrity branding, theme parks, interviews, press junkets, corporate synergy, and whatever soulless machine turns people into marketable gods. And the timing of this series was kind of insane. It arrived right as Phase 3 of the MCU was ending, right as superhero dominance was peaking, right before the genre started feeling more exhausted, more cynical, more obviously corporate, and more desperate to keep the machine running forever. So the pilot instantly feels sharp because it is not just parroting superheroes, it is parroting the entire entertainment industry built around superheroes. The Hollywood framing of heroism is so cynical, but also so believable. That is what makes it work. And thankfully, Starlight keeps the show from going full nihilism immediately. Because of course some hopeful idealist superheroes must exist too. Of course there would be people who genuinely want to help. Of course not every person with powers would be a dead-eyed corporate monster. That balance is part of why the pilot works so well. This world is cynical, but Annie is not. At least not yet. Also, is this opening one of the only times we actually see the Seven do anything publicly heroic? Because that is something that immediately stands out to me. Homelander is so likable in the first episode. That is almost weird to say now, but he is. He feels like this perfect all-American superhero. He hugs old ladies, he kisses babies, he smiles, he waves, he says the right things, he looks completely put together. And it is actually believable that people would love him so much. That is something I feel like the rest of the series sometimes loses. We know Homelander is evil, obviously, but in the pilot, you can actually feel why the public worships him. He does not just show up floating above people like some deranged god at a political rally. He looks like a hero. He performs heroism well. He seems safe, polished, patriotic, comforting, and iconic. At this stage, he does not seem like a man barely holding back a psychotic break. He seems like Captain America if Captain America had better PR, but a worse soul. Maybe the later seasons are showing him breaking down over time, and that is fair. But watching the pilot again reminds me how important the illusion of Homelander was. Homelander works best when you understand why the world believes in him before you fully understand why they should really be terrified. Then we meet Hughie. And man, Hughie is so young here. The square haircut, the awkward energy, the skinny softness, the entire "please do not make eye contact with me too aggressively or I might apologize" vibe. It is perfect. Perfect. I am probably going to use that word a lot in this video. And it is still wild that Simon Pegg was the visual inspiration for Hughie in the original comic, then ended up playing Hughie's dad in the show. I know they are very different actors, but I kind of love that. There's something weirdly poetic about it. I would be very interested to see a Shaun of the Dead era Simon Pegg tackle Hughie directly. I think that would have been fascinating. But Jack Quaid's version has such a specific early charm. Robin having to basically ask Hughie out is also perfect for his character at this point. There's something so charming and adorable about early Hughie. He feels like someone who has never really stepped into his own life yet. He is sweet, nervous, passive, funny, kind, and almost aggressively non-threatening. And that version of Hughie is something I really miss. By season 5, that innocence is mostly gone for me. And I get it. Characters change. He has been through hell. He has worked with the boys, dated Starlight, dealt with Vought, helped in political campaigns, gotten pulled into government operations, and seen things no normal person should ever have to process. But part of what made Hughie so powerful in the beginning was that every step into this world felt like a major transformation. He was the underdog. He was the normal guy. He was the person whose world was too small to survive the truth. And even when later seasons still write him as the heart or the optimist sometimes, the scale of what he has experienced makes it harder for me to fully feel that same naive underdog energy. Early Hughie feels like a guy who should not be anywhere near this story, and that is why he works. Then Robin dies, and the editing on that is still incredible. Don't you ever besmirch Billy Joel, then the train sound, then she is just gone. Gone. Gone from the show, gone from Hughie's life, and he is left standing there covered in her blood, still holding her hands. It is instantaneous. There is no time to process it. There is no build-up, no warning, no dramatic slow-motion countdown where you know tragedy is about to strike. It just happens, and that is what makes it so horrifying. You are trapped in Hughie's perspective. Your brain has to catch up at the same speed his does. 1 second he is talking to the girl he loves. The next second she is meat and blood on the pavement. It is awful. It is disgusting. It is traumatizing, but it is disgusting with purpose. That is the difference. The shock locks you into Hughie. You understand immediately why this would break him. You understand why his life cannot just continue. You understand why Vought is terrifying before you even know the full scale of the company. And then the show makes you sit in the aftermath. The delayed horror, then real time comes crashing back and everything falls to the ground. It is one of the most shocking pilot moments I can remember, and it still works because it is not just there to make you say, wow, they really went there. It is the inciting trauma of the entire series. It gives the show a human wound. Then we cut to Annie training to Barracuda by heart, and the tonal contrast is brilliant. You go from Hughie's life being destroyed to this adorable, earnest, small-town superhero girl lifting cars and punching walls with the purest, I'm gonna make it energy imaginable. And I smiled, because that is what Annie brings to the pilot. Hope. She is bright. She is sincere. She is excited. She still believes being a hero means helping people. And because we already know what kind of show this is, that innocence immediately feels fragile. You do not just like her. You worry for her. You can already feel the world sharpening its teeth. The instant cut to her being interviewed is also really smart. The cinematography shows us Annie through the viewfinder of the camera while an off-screen female voice has her turn around slowly. It is not completely ominous yet, but the casting couch energy feels hard to ignore, especially knowing what scene is coming later this episode. Maybe that is just how these auditions work. I don't know. I have not auditioned for the 7. Shockingly, Vought has not called me. But the show is already making the process feel uncomfortable. The urine test, the lie detector test, the clinical corporate evaluation. The way becoming one of the world's greatest heroes feels less like being called to a sacred mission and more like applying for a brand partnership with a drug screening. I don't remember Captain America getting drug tested before he joined the Avengers, but honestly, maybe Nick Fury tested him while he was thawing out. The point is, the pilot does such a good job making the 7 feel normal and realistic instead of fantastical. This is not a mythic hall of gods. This is a corporation. This is HR. This is legal. This is PR. This is media training. This is brand management. And that is a great early setup for the contrast that is going to crush both Hughie and Annie. They are both about to meet their heroes, and both of them are going to learn that the heroes are not what they thought. I love Annie's answer in the interview about hope versus naivety. It is one of those lines that instantly tells you who she is. She is not stupid. She is not unaware that the world is dark. She just refuses to believe darkness is the only truth. But it also makes me question what Stan Edgar was thinking by promoting her to the 7. Because from his perspective, Annie is basically prey. He had to know what the 7 was. He had to know what kind of people were in that tower. He had to know that her sincerity and innocence would make her vulnerable to being corrupted, exploited, or destroyed. In a way, putting Starlight in the 7 feels like throwing a lamb into a room full of wolves and calling it empowerment. Maybe that is the point. Maybe Vought wanted someone fresh, marketable, wholesome, and easy to control. But watching it now, it feels even more sinister because the system knows exactly what it does to people like Annie, and it sends her in there anyway. The dual narrative between Hughie and Annie is excellent. I'd argue it's essential to the narrative, in fact. That might be one of the biggest things the pilot has that later seasons lost. Hughie and Annie feel like mirrored protagonists. Hughie is seeing the corruption of superheroes from the civilian victim side. Annie is seeing the corruption from inside the superhero machine. He is outside looking in. She is inside looking out. Both of them are naive in different ways. Both of them believe in heroes in different ways. Both of them are about to be disillusioned in different ways, and that creates this beautifully destined duo dynamic. They are not just a romance. They are two sides of the same awakening. I do not think later seasons always preserve that. The show becomes much more of an ensemble, which makes sense, but it also means Hughie and Annie stop feeling like the dual heart of the story. Frenchie and Kimiko get arcs. Butcher dominates. Homelander dominates. The world expands. The satire gets even bigger. But in the pilot, the emotional engine is so clean. Hughie's life is collapsing. Annie's dreams are coming true. And we know both roads are leading into the same darkness. That is great storytelling. Then Vought immediately covers for A-Train. The press conference gives the public a clean story about a bank robber chase, and while that narrative is being sold on TV, a Vought lawyer is already arriving at Hughie's dad's place with money and an NDA. That is such a clean, brutal way to establish Vought. They do not need to scream. They do not need to threaten at first. They just arrive with paperwork. That is scarier in some ways. The machine is already moving before Hughie has even processed the trauma. And one of the beautiful things the pilot does is that, at least at first, it lets you think A-Train might just be the bad apple. Maybe he is the one reckless hero. Maybe this is the one corrupt member of an otherwise noble group. The show slowly pulls back the curtain, one hero at a time. It lets you keep hoping there's still someone decent in the seven, and that means you are learning at the same pace as Hughie and Annie. You are naive with them. You are hopeful with them. Then the show punishes that hope one revelation at a time. Annie wearing her hoodie over her Starlight costume while sitting by the police scanner in her small town is honestly adorable. It feels like a glimpse at a completely different show. A sweet show. A more innocent show. A show about a young woman fighting small-time crime in a quiet town because she actually believes helping people matters. And honestly, the world of the boys could use that show too. That is part of what makes Annie important. She represents a version of superheroism that still has a soul, at least before Vought gets to her. And the way the episode crosscuts Hughie and Annie's trajectories is so effective. Hughie's life keeps spiraling downward. Annie's life seems to be getting better and better. He is drowning in grief. She is rising into her dream. And because we know what kind of world this is, the contrast feels almost eerie. It is cathartic and tragic at the same time. You are happy for Annie, but you are already bracing for impact. You are devastated for Hughie, but you can feel his story is just beginning. It is like the pilot is running on 6 cylinders of epicness. Yes, I said that. I stand by it. Simon Pegg as Hughie's father is also perfect. And the line, "Son, you don't have the fight. You never have. Neither do I." Oof, that hurts. It is such a devastating father-son moment because it is not cruel in a loud way. It is worse. It is resigned. His dad does not believe in Hughie because he does not believe in himself. He is not saying, "You are weak," from a place of domination. He is saying, "We are weak," from a place of generational surrender. And that explains so much about why Hughie is the way he is. This is how Hughie became Hughie, a good man, a gentleman, but a man who has been taught not to fight, a man who has been taught to accept the check, sign the paper, keep his head down, and just focus on survival. And knowing that Simon Pegg was the inspiration for comic Hughie makes that casting even better. It creates this weird mirror world feeling where you can almost imagine Hughie's dad as the version of Hughie who never met Butcher, the Hughie who never fought back, the Hughie who just lived a normal, quiet, defeated life. And that makes this scene hurt even more, because the pilot is not just asking if Hughie will get revenge. It is asking if Hughie will become the first man in his family to find the fight. Seeing Ashley Barrett in the pilot is insane now, because this week, going into the series finale, Ashley Barrett is somehow the president of the United States. And here, she is basically just Vought brand management. She seems almost normal, polished, professional, maybe a little fake, sure, but not monstrous. Not this heinous, degraded, power-starved, spiritually radioactive character she becomes later. And honestly, it almost makes me upset at how cynical the show eventually gets. Because yes, I'm sure Season 1 Ashley is already compromised. She works for Vought. She is part of the machine. But is she the same character we get by Season 5? Is she the same person I now cannot think about without remembering the cursed tech cave material from Dirty Business? I seriously doubt it. Ugh, I'm thinking about that episode again. I don't want to think about that episode anymore. Anyway, the Vought shareholder presentation is also perfect. It is so obviously this Disney-style corporate entertainment meeting about theme parks, movie franchises, merchandising, box office records, brand expansion, and films entering the billion-dollar club. And it works because it is barely even parody. It feels like the MCU, Disney, celebrity culture, corporate America, and religious hero worship all got blended into one evil PowerPoint. Then Ashley praises Starlight for how smart her humble, modest interview answers were, and Annie just says that that was what she really believed. That contrast is perfect. Ashley hears branding, Annie means sincerity. Ashley hears tragedy, Annie is just being herself. And that is the storm cloud over Annie's entire future with Vought. She enters this world thinking sincerity still matters, and everyone around her immediately processes sincerity as marketability. Then Starlight gets called on stage, and honestly, this scene feels so hopeful. That is what makes it hurt. Because I know what is coming. I know where this goes. And now I'm getting that sick feeling in my stomach because she is walking into her dream, and we already know her dream is about to become a nightmare. And what makes it even more frustrating is that Annie adored the Deep. She looked up to him. She had a childhood crush on him. She probably daydreamed about him as this handsome, heroic, ocean-saving member of the Seven. And the awful thing is, if he had just been a decent human being, he probably could have won her over naturally. He probably could have had an actual relationship with her if he had been kind, patient, and normal. But no, we know who he is. He's awful. He's disgusting. He's Kevin. I hate Kevin. I hate Kevin so much. He is my least favorite character in the entire series. And yes, I know calling him Kevin instead of the Deep makes it sound pettier, but I need to strip away the superhero branding. I need to call him by the name of the pathetic man underneath the aquatic marketing campaign. Kevin is terrible. Moving over to Hughie, his panic attack scene is excellent. It is also such a horrifying situation to even imagine. Your loved one's murderer is everywhere, on posters, on screens, on billboards, in commercials, on products, in public conversation. Everyone else sees a celebrity. You see the man who ran through the person you loved and left you holding her hands in the street. That would break anyone, and I think that constant bombardment speeds up Hughie's transformation. He cannot grieve normally because the world will not let him escape A-Train's face. The world keeps celebrating the man who destroyed him. That is such a strong early engine for the series. Then we go back to Annie, and oh no. Yuck. The Deep is giving Annie a tour of Seven Tower. Immediately my soul is trying to crawl out of my body. What is interesting, though, is that the Deep says he felt like a fraud on his first day at the Seven. And I do think that is actually a potentially interesting character detail. We really do not know that much about his past, at least from what I remember. And as much as I hate Kevin, I would genuinely be interested in seeing how he became the pathetic, entitled, abusive, insecure creep he is when we meet him in Season 1. Was he always the pretty boy who got what he wanted? Was he already used to women wanting him before the Seven gave him even more status and power? Or was he ever more like Annie? Was he ever someone who entered this world with insecurity, fear, and a desire to belong, then got corrupted by the power structure around him? That would not excuse him. Nothing excuses what Kevin does, but understanding where evil comes from is not the same as excusing it. And honestly, a real Deep origin story could have been interesting as a warning about what happens when insecurity gets baptized by fame, status, and unchecked power. Then Annie says she never had a crush on Homelander because that would be like having a crush on Jesus. And wow, that is perfect foreshadowing, because whether the writers knew exactly how far they were going to take it or not, that line basically predicts the whole Homelander Messiah direction. Although, to be honest, I'm not completely sure I would have taken Homelander as far into the full Messiah replacement imagery as the show eventually does if I were the one writing Beyond Season 1, but the seed is absolutely there. Homelander is already being treated like something beyond a celebrity. He is not just famous, he is sacred, untouchable, worshipped. And the irony of Annie talking about Jesus while Kevin is standing behind her secretly being the worst man alive is just... ugh. I feel bad calling Kevin so many names because I really don't believe in dehumanizing people. Dehumanizing someone often gets in the way of actually understanding how they became what they are. But I had such a strong attachment to Starlight when I first watched the series in 2019. And seeing what he does to her still makes me so furious. She is so sweet here, so wholesome, so sincere, and he violates that. He steals something from her on her first day in the tower. Now, I do think some later season reveals about Annie's past complicate or even contradict my original understanding of who she was before joining the Seven, but in the pilot, I do not buy that she is secretly some wild, cruel, hypocritical, mean girl behind closed doors. I just don't. The Annie of the pilot feels genuinely sweet in every setting. She is not just performing innocence for the cameras, she is the same person in private that she is in public. That is part of why the pilot works. She is not naive because she is stupid. She is innocent because she still believes goodness is possible, and that matters. Then Kevin says, "It's just a question of how bad you want to be in the Seven." First of all, Kevin, you are a real piece of garbage. Second, I wish Annie had walked out of that room right there. I wish she had said no, left the tower, gone back home, and found some other way to be heroic outside of the Vought machine. But that is not who she is yet. That is the tragedy. Season 1 Annie is not the version of Starlight who can burn it all down yet. She is still the girl who worked her whole life to get there. She is still the girl whose entire identity, family, dream, and sense of purpose have been pointed at this one room. And Kevin knows that. That is what makes it so vile. He does not just threaten her physically or sexually. He threatens her dream, her reputation, her hometown, the kids who look up to her, the entire story she has told herself about who she is. He turns her hope into leverage. That is evil. And yes, looking ahead, I do think Starlight becomes a wasted character in the series in a lot of ways. I think both Annie and Hughie often feel like leads trapped in repetitive relationship drama. Every season they seem like they fight and are about to break up, then they circle back around to dating each other again. The show keeps them important, but not always interesting. It is similar to Frenchie and Kimiko, where it sometimes feels like the writers know they need these characters around, but do not always know what to do with them. And with Annie specifically, I really dislike how later seasons try to retroactively frame her as more of a bully or a wild girl before joining the Seven. Maybe there is a way to reconcile that with what we see in the pilot. Maybe there's a version where she used to be cruel, then changed before the events of season 1, but that is not what the pilot communicates to me at all. The Annie we meet here is sincere, she is hopeful, she is sweet. She is not perfect, but she is not secretly evil either. I've known people who seem sweet in public and are awful behind closed doors. That is not the energy Annie gives in this pilot. She feels consistent. That is why what happens to her hurts. Then Kevin says, basically, think of all the kids who look up to you. He is saying, I will destroy your reputation. I will destroy your dream. I will destroy the version of yourself you have spent your whole life trying to become. Unless you do this one little thing for me. Despicable, vile, evil. He really should die in the finale. Actually, no. Better yet, let a shark bite it off and make him survive without it. That would be more thematically appropriate. But when he says, just 3 minutes with me and all your dreams come true, Annie. That bastard. I hate Kevin. I hate Kevin. I hate him so much. He puts her in such an awful position, and yet I do want to give the show credit here. Because as horrible and uncomfortable as this scene is, the show handles it so much better than the comic ever did. It ties the moment into Me Too. It connects the superhero world to real-world power abuses. It makes the ugliness feel grounded instead of just edgy. It understands how exploitation can hide behind opportunity, branding, celebrity, and dreams. And from a story standpoint, that kind of revenge narrative has power for a reason. The I spit on your grave structure exists because people understand the emotional force of seeing someone harmed, degraded, and then eventually fighting back against the person or the system that harmed them. So even though I despise the scene, and I despise the deep, I think the pilot earns it dramatically. It is not just there to disgust you. It is there to break Annie's illusion. It is there to show what Vought really is. It is there to mirror Hughie's disillusionment from the other side of the machine. Hughie learns superheroes can destroy innocent people and walk away protected. Annie learns superheroes can destroy innocent people from inside the same room and call it opportunity. That is why the pilot works. The shock has a purpose. The disgust has a target. The pain has a character attached to it. And that is exactly what I miss from season 1. The translucent appearance on Jimmy Fallon is such a great early example of how efficient this pilot is. In about 1 minute, it does 3 things. It shows how close the world of the boys is to our world. It sets up Translucent's powers and how he can be defeated. And it quietly sets up that he is the kind of creep who would spy on Annie in the bathroom by revealing he has to be naked to use his powers. All of that in one talk show clip. For a 60-minute pilot, this episode is brutally efficient with its time in the best way possible. Then Butcher shows up. How many nannies shake their babies? What a beautifully weird Butcher first line. And honestly, I find Butcher's bizarre little words of wisdom and cultural references really charming in season 1. He feels like an odd guy who does not quite belong anywhere. He's crude, cynical, strange, and immediately magnetic. And the nanny cam speech is actually a great early Butcher worldview moment. He basically says nanny cams are a billion-dollar industry built on keeping parents terrified of an extremely rare thing. Most people will never need the camera, but fear makes them buy it anyway. Now personally, I'd guess a lot of parents see nanny cams as worth it, even if there is only a tiny chance they ever become useful. If you are trusting someone with your child, I get why that fear exists. But to Butcher, the nanny cams Hughie sells are just another symbol of the system. Fear, control, comfort through surveillance, the illusion of safety. It is his first attempt to wake Hughie up out of the Matrix he is living in. And then Hughie saying Butcher looks like he would star in the adult film parody of The Matrix is an incredible joke, because I was literally just thinking, oh, this is Butcher trying to wake Hughie up from The Matrix. The walk through the street even plays like that. Butcher is pointing out how the world is asleep to the truth hidden all around them. And here is the thing. The soups are the nanny cam. They make people feel safe. They make people feel watched over. People participate in the illusion because the illusion is so comforting. And Butcher might be pretending to be a Fed, but he is not completely lying to Hughie. This is how the world works. Or at least it is how this world works. Actually, I would argue it still works that way in our world too. It is just harder now because cameras are everywhere, information is everywhere, and people have to actively work to stay ignorant. But they still do. We all do in different ways. And I'm not literally talking about nanny cams, by the way. I do not have any kids. I do not have any hidden cameras, thankfully. Personally, recording everything feels a little creepy to me. It feels like one of those slippery slopes where we start saying, well, surveillance is fine if it keeps us safe. But who has access to the cameras? Who watches the watchmen? How do you know who to trust? I've never said this on the channel before, but the line from Steve Rogers in Civil War, "The safest hands are still our own," is probably one of the reasons he is the MCU character that I personally relate to the most. Not because I think I'm literally Captain America, I'm just some wannabe neat in a hoodie and mask, but because I understand that belief. The belief that you have a moral duty to do your best for other people, but that handing your conscience to an institution does not magically make the institution righteous. Most people do not like thinking that way. People like their bubbles. They like their comfort. And when someone tries to pop the bubble, it is very easy to frame that person as the villain. That is why it is so easy to demonize the boys inside this series. And speaking of that, how is it possible that the boys become fugitives in one season and then just go back to living somewhat normal lives in later seasons? I don't think it is possible. That is one of those multi-season logic problems that start bothering me more in hindsight. In a world with cameras everywhere and Homelander flying around, I have a very hard time believing these people can just move freely without Homelander descending from the sky and crushing them the second they step off the curb, just like Robin. Then Butcher says, "Hughie, what have you got to lose that you haven't already lost?" That is such a strong line. And yes, Butcher is not morally good. I am not saying he is a healthy mentor. He is dangerous. He is manipulative. He is a wrecking ball with a Kiwi accent. But in a general sense, that line is something a lot of people need to hear. If you want something, if you are terrified to move, if your whole life is shrinking because you are afraid of risk, at some point you do have to ask, what are you protecting? What are you holding on to? What do you have to lose that you have not already lost by refusing to act? Starting this YouTube channel was a risk for me. And honestly, right now, it is the best thing I have going on in my life. My day jobs feel increasingly awful the more I fall in love with YouTube. I do not make money from this yet, obviously, but I'm doing something I love, and that pays dividends mentally in a way my real jobs never could. So I get why that line lands. The show does an amazing job building Hughie to this moment because we know his answer before he gives it. Then Hughie enters the soup club, and it is as gross as it is perfect, because this is the real entrance into Vought's world behind closed doors. Then Hughie sees the security tape of A-Train laughing about killing Robin, and this is dark. Even for A-Train, this feels dark. Now later we understand him better. Maybe it is the addiction. Maybe it is denial. Maybe it is his way of surviving the guilt. Maybe he laughs because if he takes it seriously for 1 second, he has to admit what he did. But for Hughie, it does not matter. That tape is enough. That is the thing that fully convinces him to help Butcher. Then we cut to Annie throwing up. And that is such an excellent way to immediately show how far she has fallen, how alone she is, how quickly this dream has become something shameful and isolating. Then Maeve shows up, and even the one other woman on the 7 offers almost no comfort. Now, to be fair, compared to everyone else, Maeve is not the worst person in the room. She does tell Annie never to let them see her like that, and there is maybe a tiny attempt to strengthen her in that. But you immediately get to sense that Maeve has been in this world way too long. She is too disillusioned, too hardened, too numb. She is not comfort. She is a warning. Then Translucent is naked in a bathroom spying on them, and the show is basically saying, yep, it might just be all of them that are corrupt. A-Train is awful. The Deep is awful. Translucent is awful. Maeve is broken. But Homelander? Thank God for Homelander. He is the only good one. Right? Even Butcher tells Hughie that Homelander is the one perfect soup. He literally calls him a saint. That is crazy to hear now. Butcher calling Homelander a saint. That is how well the pilot protects the Homelander illusion. And I'm so glad Hughie initially rejects Butcher's offer even after everything he's experienced, because Hughie really is the underdog. He really is the scrawny kid. This is not who he is. This is not his world. This is not something he is prepared for. He is scared, and he wants to live. He has not yet accepted Butcher's worldview. He has not accepted that there is nothing on Earth worth living for as long as those super bleeps are walking around. I won't say the word, but I do enjoy that Butcher calls them that. Then we meet Madeline Stillwell negotiating with the Baltimore mayor, and I love this scene. They're talking about crime rates, demographics, financial investment, merchandising rights, exclusivity contracts, and PR teams like they are trying to sign a superhero to a major city the same way a team signs a football player. It is insane, and it is brilliant. I do wish the show gave us more concrete evidence of what a Vought superhero actually does for crime rates, because my assumption is that most of these heroes are more public relations assets than actual nightly crime fighters, but the business side is fascinating. The city gets partial merchandising rights, Vought gets the brand expansion, the hero gets placement. Everyone talks like this is civic safety, but it is really corporate sports entertainment with crime analytics. That is what I love about Season 1. It is so clever, so specific, so eerily believable. Then we get Starlight's mom. Ugh. This hits me very differently now than it did in 2019, because I know this type of parent. She did not raise a child. She raised a do-over. There are a lot of parents like that. They think it is love, but really, it is vanity. They want to look like great parents. They want to show off how well their child is doing so they can brag about their own sacrifice, their own discipline, their own parenting. Starlight's dreams, whatever they might have been without her mother's influence, were probably very different. But her mom needed to raise a star. She needed Annie to live the dream for her. And as much as I hate the Season 5 storyline of introducing Annie's dad in the 11th hour, I do believe the idea that he saw what was happening, that he saw Annie being completely shaped by her mother's ambition and could not stand by and watch it anymore. I wish she had destroyed Annie's dreams, honestly, because they were not really Annie's dreams. They were her mom's dreams wearing Annie's face, and the show gets so much right with Annie's mom. It is love as abuse, correction as perfection, control as care. Her mom truly thinks she is helping, but she is shaving off the rough edges that make Annie Annie, trying to leave behind this perfect, compliant Christian pageant superhero. That is why, even though I may not love every line of Annie's church camp speech later in the season, I loved the boldness of her finally speaking her truth, because she had been silenced her whole life. And I'll say this here too. They may tell you your voice does not matter, but when you speak, someone will listen. Your voice matters to people too. Then we get the pan to Hughie eating a sandwich after Annie gets off the phone with her mom, and it is such an outrageously unassuming way to finally bridge their worlds. No big dramatic collision, no Destiny music, no slow motion eye contact. Just a guy eating a sandwich and a girl crying on a bench. Hughie is in his own world, loving his sandwich, and then he notices a pretty girl crying next to him. That is it. That is the collision. And it is perfect because it feels so natural. Two broken people sitting near each other before either of them understands how connected their stories are going to become. Then Annie says she did what the Deep wanted because in the back of her mind, she knew her mom would not want her to throw away everything that she had worked so hard for. That is devastating. And it makes her mom's influence even more awful. Because Annie is not just thinking about herself in that moment. She is thinking about her mom's expectations, her mom's sacrifices, her mom's dream, her mom's voice in her head. That is not healthy love. That is child abuse dressed up pretty and put on a pageant stage. And it is harder to recognize because it can feel like love. Because the parent may truly believe they are being loving. They may believe every correction, every sacrifice, every pressure, every controlled decision is kindness. But if your child becomes an altar where you sacrifice their selfhood to your ambition, that is not love. That is vanity with a family photo. Then Hughie gives Annie the story that is obviously about Robin, and it is another masterful pilot moment. Because he is giving Annie advice, but he is also showing us what he loved about Robin. Just because you fall does not mean you have to stay there. You fall a lot, and you just keep getting back up. That is beautiful advice. Robin inspired Hughie. And now through Hughie, Robin's words are inspiring Annie too. That means Robin is not just dead motivation. She is still echoing through the story beyond the grave. I also love the framing of Hughie and Annie introducing themselves with the gap between them filled by Seven Tower looming in the background. That shot is so good. You can feel how much thought went into everything in this pilot. The cinematography is not just pretty. It is storytelling. The tower is literally between them. The institution is between them. I do not remember feeling that kind of visual thoughtfulness as strongly in later seasons. In this episode, the cinematography feels like a character of its own. Then we get Butcher coaching Hughie through the phone call with the Vought lawyers in some cramped pub bathroom. And I love it. It is so fun, so grimy, so small scale. Butcher feeding him lines, Hughie panicking, the two of them squeezed into this ridiculous little space like this is the most pathetic spy mission ever assembled. It feels authentic, it feels alive, and it works because the stakes are so personal. Then we go back to Homelander when Starlight first meets him. And again, he is so charming. It honestly barely feels like the Homelander we now know. He says he personally wrote a welcome speech for her. He is warm, humble, friendly, Captain America-ish. He smiles like a sweetheart. He sounds like the hero everyone thinks he is. And then Starlight puts the Deep in his place, which is great. Then Translucent interrupts to complain that the biggest crime in the city is people pirating his new movie. And that is another perfect reality check. Even in this supposedly heroic room, these people are narcissists. The city is full of suffering, and Translucent is worried about piracy numbers. But Homelander interrupts him and says he is giving the Seven a bad first impression to Annie. He just wants to hear stories about the team's heroics and how they've helped the community this week. And he says it with this giant, sincere Boy Scout smile. And I'm sitting here like, what is going on? I have not watched this season since 2019, so I am legitimately trying to figure out whether Homelander is acting here or whether he breaks down mentally later on. Because the show always treats him like he was always dangerous, and I believe that. But he is genuinely charming here. He feels different. Maybe that is the point. Maybe this is the mask at its strongest. Maybe everyone else knows the truth, and Annie is the only one being fooled. Maybe Homelander is performing for the new girl because he enjoys being seen as the saint. But whatever the answer is, it reminds me how powerful the illusion was at the beginning of the series. Then Butcher gives Hughie his big speech to convince him to plant the bug, and honestly, it feels like something Johnny Lawrence would say in Cobra Kai to motivate his students. Just quit being a beep, Hughie, and somehow it works. It is funny, it is crude, it is insane, and Hughie actually does it. I'm almost certain Hughie is unintentionally sitting in Starlight's seat in the Seven boardroom when he plants the bug. And if that is intentional, I love that detail. It is such a small, quiet way of tying them together before they even understand what they are to each other. Also, are the Seven bathrooms gender neutral? Because how is Starlight in the same bathroom as Hughie? I mean, it is a neat crossover moment, and it pays off the earlier Translucent bathroom setup beautifully, but still, I have questions about Vought's bathroom layout. And then Hughie leaves the tower, and he is so excited. He feels confident. Butcher is actually giving him affirmation, and for one moment, Hughie thinks he has crossed into something bigger. Then Butcher cuts him loose. Oof. Hughie is basically being forced to take the blue pill after already seeing the truth of the Matrix. But he cannot just unsee it now. He has changed. The genie is out of the bottle. And we know later why Butcher is soft toward Hughie. The Lenny backstory gives that relationship another layer. But even without that, you can feel something here. Butcher sees this kid and does not want this life for him. Unfortunately, by season 5, I don't feel like that relationship carries the same weight anymore. I'm sure they'll bring up Lenny in the finale to try to make us care about Butcher and Hughie again, but they have not felt like this in years. Here, though, it works. Then Hughie accepts Butcher's rejection, but he still shows him that he's ripping up the $45,000 check, and I love that. It feels like Hughie is already seeing Butcher as some kind of respected older brother figure. He is saying, you may be done with me, but you still changed me. And Butcher's face says everything. No big speech needed. He realizes Hughie might actually have something. Then, Hughie, You're a good lad. That is great. I love that. Then we get the Billy and Hughie takedown of Translucent, and I love this scene. Honestly, this might be the only time in the entire series where I feel like the boys take down a Soup exactly the way that I want them to. No powers, no overpowered allies, no Kimiko, no Starlight, no A-Train, just two normal guys trying to outsmart the limits of a superhuman body and survive a fight they absolutely should not be able to win. It is gritty, it is nasty, it is desperate, it is a brawl, it is David versus Goliath. And what makes it even better is that the opening scene had those kids debating whether Translucent or the Deep is the weakest member of the seven. So when Hughie and Butcher fight Translucent, and it still feels nearly impossible, the show proves how dangerous even the weakest members are. That is perfect. Perfect. Butcher telling Hughie to run when he shows up to save him, and Hughie not listening, is also perfect. That sets up the brotherhood between them immediately. It also shows Butcher something he does not want to admit. He cannot do this alone. He needs Hughie. And Hughie, at this point, believes he needs Butcher to become the stronger man he wants to be. Honestly, there is a world where this show might have been tighter and more impactful if Mother's Milk, Frenchie, and Kimiko never joined the boys. I know that sounds crazy. I know people love them. But the relationships between Hughie and Butcher and Hughie and Annie are so strong in this pilot that everyone else eventually feels secondary to me. I just do not care about the other three members of the boys the same way. Not really. Hughie starting to run for the exit, then freezing and coming back to help Butcher, is the moment he crosses the line. He and Butcher both know that without Hughie, Butcher would have lost the fight with Translucent. That is Hughie fully joining this world and never looking back. Then the Jimmy Fallon bit comes back into play as the way Hughie figures out how to defeat Translucent. And again, the efficiency of this pilot is ridiculous. The setup was casual. The payoff is life or death. That is good writing. It reminds me of my probably unpopular opinion that My Hero Academia went downhill as soon as Deku got powers. I like what the show became, but the better story to me was Deku with no powers. And similarly, I kind of think the most interesting version of The Boys is one where Hughie and Butcher are outmatched humans trying to take down Soups through intelligence, desperation, and strategy. No Frenchie, no Kimiko, no Mother's Milk, no superpowered teammates, just underdogs trying to kill gods one weakness at a time. This is not me fully rewriting the show right now. That is a different Dominus's job. Maybe one day, if people want that. But as criticism, I do think the pilot's small-scale human versus Soup energy is unbelievably strong. Then Butcher says, "So look, technically I'm not a Fed." With that little shrug like it is barely an important detail. And Hughie's high-pitched, "What?" Perfect. I love the energy here. This is peak The Boys. Then we get the final plane scene with the Baltimore mayor and his son, and Homelander appears in the sky, and suddenly the show reveals the truth. He lasers the plane, kills them all, destroys the evidence, and just like that, the stakes explode. The episode starts with this almost Batman-level vigilante setup. Two normal men trapping and fighting one Soup in a dirty electronics store. Then the ending tells us, oh, eventually they're going to have to take down Superman, and Superman is evil. That is a crazy pilot ending. Besides the nudity, I genuinely have no major complaints about this pilot. It is amazing in almost every way. And I stand by what I said back in 2019. This really did feel like the best show since Breaking Bad. It could have been. If it had stayed the course, I think there was a much tighter, more intelligent version of The Boys that lived up to the promise of this pilot. A version where Homelander remained the patriotic all-American hero in public while being the devil behind the mask. A version where Hughie and Butcher worked their way through the seven one by one. A version where Annie eventually became the mole inside the machine. A version that lasted maybe 3 seasons and cut straight to the heart of what made this concept so great. Those are just my initial thoughts. But watching this pilot again, I'm reminded why I fell in love with this show. The stakes were simple. The darkness had purpose. The characters felt human. The satire felt sharp. The world felt believable. The shock served the story. The pilot did not need to be bigger. It did not need to be grosser. It did not need to be more humiliating. It just needed to be this. A grieving normal man, a hopeful young hero, a corporation selling gods, a monster wearing the American flag, and a butcher trying to wake someone up. This was The Boys at its best. This was the show I wanted to follow all the way to the end. And even after all these years, even knowing where the series goes, I can say it. The Boys pilot was perfect. Perfect.